My name is Sadie Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how my own father told me not to come home for Christmas, forgetting that I legally owned the house he lived in. It was late December when I returned to Boulder, Colorado. The air was bitter and dry, the kind that clung to your coat and sliced at your face. My boots crunched over the thin layer of snow as I stepped into the small apartment I was renting, just temporary shelter until I figured out what came next. After 10 years in the military, serving in places people only whisper about in fear, I had expected some things to feel foreign. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I dropped my duffel bag by the door and slumped into the sagging chair near the window. Across the street, Christmas lights twinkled on balconies and porch rails. Warm colors, laughter behind frosted glass. Families, traditions. For a moment, I let myself believe this year might be different, that I wouldn't be the forgotten one anymore. Then my phone lit up. It was a message from my father. Don't come home for Christmas. You'd better stay away. No, hi Sadie. No, how are you? Just that cold, clinical message, like I was an intruder trying to break into their lives again. My hands trembled, not from the cold but from something worse. From the emptiness. From the realization that after all these years, after all the sacrifices, I was still an outsider in my own family. I stared at the screen, waiting, hoping for another message to follow. Maybe from my mom. Maybe from my brother, Logan. But the phone stayed dark. Silent. So I typed back 2 words. Okay. Understood. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a question. It was a full stop. A quiet goodbye to any illusion I had left. I had bought that plane ticket a month earlier. Every night since, I'd stared at it like it was a doorway to the life I thought I could reclaim. I imagined walking through the door to warm hugs, maybe a surprised smile from my father, finally proud of me. My mother's kitchen smelling of cinnamon. My brother teasing me about how long I'd been gone. It was childish hope, but sometimes even soldiers dream. Now I canceled the ticket. Just like that. The room around me felt colder than the snow falling outside. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, but it did nothing to warm the ache that bloomed in my chest. And as I sat there, I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who tried so hard to be good enough for a father who only saw her as a disappointment. Victor Monroe. My father. A man who commanded every room he entered with a rigid spine and clipped tone. A man the neighbors praised as strict but noble. But to me, he was the reason I learned how to hold my breath when I walked into a room. Because when his gaze landed on me, it felt like I was already guilty of something. I remember when I was 8, I drew a picture of our house surrounded by flowers and sunshine. I had worked on it for hours, hoping it would make him smile. He looked at it for all of 3 seconds and muttered, "Other people's kids win science fairs. Mine just draws crayon junk." He handed it back without another word. My mom watched from the kitchen, lips pressed tight, too afraid to speak up. My brother Logan, just 10 years old, quickly shoved his own test paper in Dad's face. A 98 in math. He got a pat on the head. That was the first time I realized I wasn't like the rest of them. I didn't fit the mold my father carved for a proper Monroe child. Still I tried. God, I tried. Straight A's. Captain of the track team. Volunteer work. And when none of it earned me his respect, I enlisted. Thought maybe he'd finally say he was proud of me. But on the day I shipped out, all he said was, "Don't embarrass us out there." No hug. No goodbye. My mother cried behind him, dabbing her eyes with trembling fingers, but never stepping forward. She used to whisper to me at night, "You're stronger than he knows, Sadie. One day he'll see." But she never said it aloud. She never defended me when it counted. Logan. He didn't come to the bus station. Didn't call. I was just a shadow in his life. Forgotten, invisible. I called home from bases halfway across the world. Left voicemails. Sent money for the leaking roof. Mailed gifts for Christmas and birthdays. A pair of gloves here, a coat there. I got polite thank yous from my mother. Occasionally. Nothing from my father. Silence from Logan. And yet, some stubborn part of me held on. Some desperate, aching part thought one day they'd realize I was worthy of love. That night, alone in that dark apartment, I realized the truth. They would never see me. Not unless I forced them to look. I don't remember how long I sat in the stillness after that. Just me and the wind rattling the window. I opened my laptop, thinking maybe I'd distract myself with old photos or news. Instead, I opened a folder of scanned documents from years ago. Military paperwork, emails, a mess of digital life. And then something caught my eye. Co-ownership contract, Willow Creek. Clicked it. My heart thumped hard in my chest as I began to read. It had been years ago, almost a decade. I was 23 and just back on leave when my father called me. A rare thing. His voice was gruff but needy. "I need your signature for something," he said. "Bank stuff. Nothing big. Just to refinance the house." "It's a formality." I had been so stupidly eager. I showed up at the notary in uniform, bursting with hope that maybe, just maybe, he trusted me. That this was a gesture of respect. I signed every page without reading. Why would I? He was my dad. But reading it now, line by line, I felt the breath catch in my lungs. In the event of default or voluntary withdrawal by the primary borrower, full control of the property reverts to the cosigner. I was the cosigner. I had legal control. I owned that house. The house where they had just told me I wasn't welcome. A laugh escaped my lips, short and hollow. After everything, after all the rejection and silence, they were living in a home I legally owned. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I made a phone call. Noah Davis, a friend from my unit who had gone into law after deployment. Real estate mostly. When he picked up I said, "Noah, quick question. If a cosigner on a mortgage has primary control in case of default or transfer, and they just got kicked out by their family, what can they do?" Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he chuckled. "They can do anything they damn well please. Legally, it's your house." I didn't sleep that night. I wrote a letter instead. A formal, emotionless letter addressed to Victor and Elaine Monroe. I, Sadie Monroe, co-owner of the property located at 2125 Willow Creek Drive, hereby exercise my right to assume full control and legal authority over said property, effective January 2nd. I signed it. Staff Sergeant Sadie Monroe, United States Army, retired. Then I printed it, folded it carefully, and sent it by certified mail. Let them open it. Let them read every word. Because this time they weren't rejecting a daughter. They were rejecting the owner of the house they lived in. 3 days after I sent the letter, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from unknown numbers. My mother, Logan, and numbers I didn't recognize. Likely a lawyer or two. They didn't even wait for New Year's to roll in. Suddenly, I was the most important person in the Monroe family. I didn't answer a single call. I just sat by the window, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching snow gather on the porch railing, each ring of the phone sounding like echoes from a past I'd finally learned to detach from. It wasn't silence I wanted anymore. It was accountability. That night, just past midnight, the phone rang again. I glanced at the screen and paused. Logan. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. "Sadie," he said. His voice was sharp, anxious. "What's going on?" "Dad's freaking out. Mom's crying. That letter you sent, it's real. You're seriously doing this." I leaned back in the chair, the same way I'd leaned into helicopter wind in Afghanistan. Entered. "Yes, it's real." "You can't be serious," he said, his voice rising. "You're going to take the house? Over a stupid Christmas message." Kept my voice steady. "No, Logan. Not over a message. Over 20 years of being treated like I didn't belong. Over being ignored, dismissed, forgotten, again and again. The message was just the final nail in a coffin they built a long time ago." He scoffed. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Look, I get it, Dad's harsh. But he's still our dad. He's old school." "Old school doesn't excuse cruelty," I said flatly. From the background I heard my mother crying, then her voice came on the line, weak, trembling. Sadie, please don't do this. We didn't mean to push you away. Your father, he was angry. He didn't think you'd actually. Didn't think I'd what? Said. Stand up for myself. Silence. Mom, I continued more gently. I needed a family. All those years. I needed someone to care, to check on me. I was in combat zones while you decorated Christmas trees. I spent birthdays in field tents while you cut cakes for Logan. I still called. Still sent gifts. And what did I get back? Nothing. Sadie, she sobbed. We're sorry, we really are. Let's just talk, please. Don't do this through lawyers. I've tried talking for a decade, I whispered. It never changed anything. Now it's your turn to listen. I won't speak to anyone again until Dad calls me himself. Hung up. I sat in silence for hours. The kind of silence that's loud, pressing, vibrating inside your chest like held-in screams. But this time I didn't fold. I didn't regret. I was done begging. The next morning I got a call from a Denver law firm. The voice on the other end was measured, professional. Ms. Monroe. My name is Robert Heller. I represent Mr. and Mrs. Monroe. I believe you're aware of the situation regarding the Willow Creek property. I think we should meet. No, I said calmly. There's nothing to meet about. They'll need to vacate or agree to my terms. I've sent everything through my legal counsel. Ms. Monroe, he said, voice laced with artificial kindness. A home is more than a document. Surely we can come to an understanding that doesn't involve legal force. I smiled coldly. A home, Mr. Heller, is where someone is welcomed. They told me not to come home. Now I own the deed. I'm not forcing anything. I'm simply executing what's already mine. Another silence. Then he sighed. Very well. But I hope you reconsider the emotional toll this could take. I ended the call. That evening, another text from Logan. Please talk to Dad. He hasn't slept. He's really not well. My hands tightened around the phone. And how many sleepless nights had I endured? How many nights staring into the dark, wondering if my family even remembered I existed? I replied with one line. When he's ready to talk, he knows how to reach me. At 9:17 that night, my phone buzzed again. I stared at the screen. My father's number. For a long moment, I debated letting it go to voicemail. Then, slowly, I answered. Sadie. Just hearing my name in his voice, scratchy, tired, forced, made something twist inside me. I'm listening, I said. He cleared his throat. It sounded like he hadn't spoken all day. Look, this whole thing, it's gotten out of hand. I shouldn't have sent that message. I was angry. Stupid. But this is still your family. I said nothing. I'm sorry, he finally murmured. I was wrong. There it was. Words I had imagined hearing for years. And now that they'd come, they felt empty, like water after a fire. I appreciate the apology, I said. But it doesn't change the paperwork. You gave me this authority 10 years ago. You just forgot. Hung up. It wasn't spite. It was clarity. And just when I thought things were finally settling, the next morning came with a different storm. A call from Ethan Ford, my longtime friend and now property manager. Sadie, he said, concern heavy in his voice. I did the walkthrough. We've got a situation. What kind of situation? I found 2 people in the house. Strangers. They said they're tenants. One's a grad student. The other works nights at a bar. Cash only. No leases. No paperwork. I sat up straighter. You're telling me they've been renting out the house? To strangers. Illegally. Yes. And that's not all. There's water damage in the attic. A large gouge across the hardwood in the living room. The roof is patched with duct tape, Sadie. Tape. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. They hadn't just rejected me. They had exploited me. They had used my name, my signature, my sacrifice, and profited off it while pushing me away like a piece of discarded furniture. Send the eviction notices, I said calmly. All tenants out. 10 days. You sure? Ethan asked. Dead sure. After the call I sat down again. My fingers didn't tremble this time as I typed the next letter. It was clean, direct, and legal. I, Sadie Monroe, legal co-owner of the property at 2125 Willow Creek, hereby notify you that all rental or lodging activities are in violation of ownership rights and must cease immediately. Non-family occupants have 10 days to vacate or face legal enforcement. I printed it, signed it, and again mailed it. Certified. Let them open it. Let them read it. Because I was no longer the girl waiting at the door. I was the one who held the keys. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the time the certified eviction notice landed in their mailbox, my phone was already vibrating with more rage than remorse. It was Logan again. He didn't bother with pleasantries this time. What the hell are you doing, Sadie? He snapped the second I answered. You're kicking people out of mom and dad's house? People who are helping them pay the bills. How far are you planning to take this? I pressed the phone to my ear and stared out at the falling snow beyond the apartment window. As far as it takes, I said calmly. Logan let out a frustrated breath. You're not even trying to understand. Mom and Dad are getting older. Dad can't work the way he used to, and medical bills. Then they should have called me. I cut in, cold as the air outside. They should have reached out instead of turning the place into a cash machine using my name. I would have helped. I've always helped. But instead they lied. They didn't lie, he argued. They just handled it their way. I gave a bitter laugh. Their way being, cut the daughter out and use her legal authority to make money? That way. There was a long pause. Then Logan said quietly, You know they never thought you'd come back. That stung more than I expected. Not because I didn't already know it, but because hearing it aloud from my own brother was like an arrow landing right in the softest part of my heart. I ended the call. A few hours later my mother called. Her voice cracked before she even got through the first sentence. Sadie, please. We can fix this. I promise we'll stop the rentals. Just don't go through the courts. Don't turn this into something that'll tear us apart forever. My throat tightened. It already did, I whispered. She tried again, pleading, her voice trembling like an old violin string. He's scared, Sadie. Your father, he doesn't know how to ask for help. But he's still your father. And this is your home too. No, I said, swallowing back the ache. It was supposed to be. But it never really was. You made sure of that. And now, I'm making sure you understand what that felt like. Before she could reply, I added, From this point forward, all communication goes through Noah. No more calls. Hung up. And this time I blocked her number. Hurt. God, it hurt. But pain had taught me how to survive. And now, I was done surviving, I was taking control. The morning of January 2nd arrived in a burst of freezing wind and the pale blue of a winter sky. I stood in front of 2125 Willow Creek, wrapped in a long wool coat, my old military boots digging into the snow-covered driveway. At my side was Ethan, clipboard in hand, and a locksmith bundled in layers with a red toolbox. I looked up at the home I used to dream of returning to. This time I wasn't coming back as a daughter. I was coming back as the owner. The front door creaked open before we even knocked. My father stood in the doorway. His hair was a mess, eyes sunken with exhaustion. His jaw clenched tight enough to crack bone. He took one look at Ethan and the locksmith and barked, "What the hell is this, Sadie? You turning this into some kind of war zone?" I stepped forward without flinching, my voice steady. "I'm reclaiming what's mine. This isn't a war, Dad. This is me finally exercising the rights you handed me when you thought I was too naive to understand what I was signing." He scoffed, face flushed. "We needed help back then. You think that gives you the right to storm in here and treat us like criminals? You treated me like a ghost," I said. "And now you're shocked I stopped haunting your doorstep." He opened his mouth, but I didn't wait. I walked right past him into the house. Ethan followed, already beginning his inspection. The locksmith got to work at the door, the soft clicks of his tools echoing through the house like the sound of turning tides. The living room was almost exactly as I remembered it, except colder, lifeless. The deep scratch on the floor stood out stark against the wood, just like Ethan said. The family portrait that used to hang on the wall was gone, replaced with a blank spot. Just a nail. Just absence. My mother came out from the kitchen, her rosary clutched in shaking hands, eyes red and swollen. "Please, Sadie," she whispered, voice cracking. "This isn't you. You're not like this." "You don't know me," I replied. "You never tried to." Logan was seated on the couch, silent, face pale. He looked at me like I was a stranger invading their sanctuary. I stood in the middle of the room and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "As of this morning, I am the sole managing authority of this property. This is no longer up for discussion. The locks are being changed. Any and all rental arrangements are void. From this point forward, any occupation of the home must be approved through a formal lease under my name." My father slammed his fist on the table, the crack of wood bouncing off the walls. "You have no right. This is my house." "No," I said calmly. "This was my house the moment you put my name on the contract and never looked back. And now I'm making sure you do." The room fell into thick, choking silence. My voice didn't waver. "You have two choices. 1. Sign a lease with me. Reasonable terms, month to month, reviewed annually. 2. Vacate the property within 30 days. My mother sobbed again. "Sadie, how can you do this? This is where you grew up." "Exactly," I said. "I grew up in a house where I was never seen, never heard. That ends now." Logan stood up finally, his hands clenched. "So what? You're not even going to give them time to adjust. You're just going to take it all away." I looked him in the eye. "No, Logan. I'm not taking anything. I'm finally reclaiming what was always mine." The locksmith gave me a nod. The locks were changed. I turned to my family, what little remained of it, and gave them the final words they would hear from me that day. "You have 30 days. Make your choice." I walked out into the cold, and for the first time in my life I felt warm. The door closed behind me with a soft finality. Not a slam, not a bang, just a quiet click that echoed like thunder in my chest. I stood on the porch of the house I once dreamed of returning to, snow crunching beneath my boots, the air sharp and clean in my lungs. I had walked away before, many times, but never like this, never with power. That night, the wind howled through Boulder like it had something to say. I lay in bed at my apartment, staring at the ceiling, arms behind my head, the same military dog tag resting over my chest that had followed me across 3 continents and 2 deployments. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no apologies, no justifications. They were stunned. I knew that look on their faces too well. The realization that the girl they thought would always stay small, quiet, obedient, had grown into someone they no longer recognized. And now, she had the law on her side. 10 days passed, then 15. I kept my distance, trusting Ethan to handle inspections and paperwork. I busied myself with a part-time contract job in Denver and reconnected with a few veterans I'd lost touch with. It was peaceful. I almost convinced myself I could let it all go. Then, on the 21st day, Ethan called. "Sadie," he said, his voice tight. "I think you need to see something." I met him at Willow Creek the next morning. The house looked wrong. Not destroyed, not vandalized, just worn. There were signs of rushed packing, a moving truck parked at the curb, open boxes spilling across the lawn like broken promises. But it wasn't that caught my attention. It was the smell of something burnt in the air. I stepped inside and immediately saw it. Scorch marks on the wall in the kitchen. Nothing major. Not dangerous. But someone had left a pot on the stove too long, black smoke crawling up the drywall, curling like a warning. "They've been careless," Ethan said. "And that's not all." I spoke to one of the neighbors. Apparently, Your dad's been trying to sell some of the appliances on Facebook Marketplace. Fridge, washer, even the old stereo system in the garage. He's stripping the house, I said. Ethan nodded. I closed my eyes and let the anger settle. Not rage, something deeper. A kind of sadness that feels like slow poison. They're trying to take whatever they can before they go, I said. He handed me a folder. Inside were updated photos, itemized lists of everything damaged or removed, and a pre-drafted notice of breach of ownership agreement. They've got one more week, he reminded me. We can send this. But it's your call. I stared at the paper. A list of petty thefts and small betrayals. And still, some piece of me hesitated. But only for a moment. Send it. The final days crept by like frost spreading over glass. Quiet. I didn't hear from them again. No calls. No pleading. It was as if the house itself had fallen into a hush before departure. On the 30th morning, I drove to Willow Creek alone. Parked across the street. Sat there for a long time watching. The driveway was empty. No lights on. No car. No sounds. They were gone. I stepped out of my truck, key in hand, boots crunching on a fresh layer of snow. I stood at the gate, hand resting on the mailbox. I expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even vindication. But what I felt was emptiness. And then peace. Inside, the house was cold, lifeless. The furniture was gone. A few boxes had been left behind, like the remnants of a life quickly abandoned. No note, no goodbye. Just a silence that hummed with finality. The scratch on the floor was still there, long and jagged. The burn marks on the kitchen wall remained. Upstairs, the rooms were bare, stripped down to bones. The walls echoed with a childhood that had never felt safe. I walked through each room slowly, letting go, reclaiming, rewriting. In the living room, I stood at the same spot where my father had once told me not to embarrass the family. I looked around, then at the blank space on the wall where the family portrait had once hung. I didn't need their faces watching me anymore. I didn't need a memory. I needed a future. Later that evening, I made one final call. Ethan, I said, I have a new plan for the house. Tell me. I want to renovate it, top to bottom. But not for me. He hesitated. What do you mean? I want this place to be something better. Temporary home. For women like me. You mean, veterans? Yes, I said. Specifically female vets. The ones who came back to find the people they loved didn't recognize them anymore. The ones who gave everything and got nothing in return. They need somewhere safe. Somewhere warm. I want this to be that place. Ethan didn't answer at first. Then, you sure? I looked around at the old rooms, now silent. For the first time in my life. I'm absolutely sure. So we got to work. I used my savings and got support from the Veterans Association. Volunteers from Denver showed up. People I'd served with or those who just wanted to help. We repainted the walls, stripped the floors, patched the roof properly this time. Upstairs, we added soft beds, bookshelves, and new light fixtures. Downstairs, the kitchen became the heart of the house, a place for healing and stories and laughter. When it was done, we gave it a name. Willow House. Strong, flexible, resilient, just like the women it would welcome. On opening day, I stood on the front porch, wearing the same boots I had worn the day my father slammed the door in my face. But this time the door was wide open. 3 women arrived that morning, duffel bags in hand, eyes weary but alert. I shook each of their hands, offering a quiet smile. No questions, no judgment, just a warm bed and a new beginning. That night, after they had settled in, I lit a single candle on the windowsill in the front room. The same spot I used to sit in as a child, dreaming of being accepted. But now I wasn't waiting for anyone. The candle wasn't for them. It was for me. For Sadie, the girl they tried to break. And for every woman who would walk through Willow House's doors, carrying her own battle scars. They wouldn't have to beg for love here. They wouldn't have to shrink. They just have to show up and be seen. There's a strange kind of quiet that comes after war. Not the kind with bullets or bombs, but the ones you fight in your own bloodline. The transformation of Willow House felt like healing a wound I didn't know was still bleeding. Every paint stroke across a water-damaged wall felt like rewriting a memory. Every screw driven into a loose floorboard said, "This place is mine now." Not as a daughter desperate to belong, but as a woman who built something with her own 2 hands. The first winter at Willow House passed slowly. Snow fell quietly, and inside laughter began to bloom. The 3 women who arrived, Jules, Shantae, and Meredith, settled in with caution at first. Each had their own quiet pains tucked into their luggage. Jules had served in Afghanistan like me. She barely spoke for the first week. Shantae had just left an abusive home, still checking the locks twice every night. Meredith had been homeless for nearly a year after getting medically discharged. They all carried stories. Unspoken, raw, but familiar. At dinner I didn't ask. I just made soup, set the table, and let silence be enough. Eventually, silence turned into nods. Nods became conversation. And one night, after dishes were done and snow danced outside the windows, Jules said quietly, "This feels like the first place I've exhaled in years." Smiled. Not for recognition but because I knew exactly what she meant. And for the first time since reclaiming Willow Creek, I stopped looking back. That is, until one afternoon in late March, when Logan showed up on the front porch. I was in the garden behind the house, knees muddy, planting early spring bulbs along the edge of the fence. The breeze was still cold, but the ground was soft, ready for something new. The sound of a car door slamming made me glance up. Logan stood at the edge of the walkway, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. He looked thinner, older somehow, like the weight of everything had finally caught up. I stood slowly, wiped my hands on my jeans, and met him halfway. "Sadie," he said. "Logan." He looked at the house behind me. "So, this is what you did with it." "This is what I made of it," I corrected. He nodded slowly. "It looks different. It feels different too." There was a long pause between us, filled with everything we'd never said. He shuffled his feet, avoiding my eyes. "I shouldn't have let it go the way it did," he muttered. I didn't realize how far gone it all was. I didn't respond. I let him feel the silence. "I just thought you'd always be strong enough to take it," he added. "You always were." I tilted my head. "You mean I didn't cry loud enough to be heard?" His shoulders slumped. Maybe we got too used to you not asking for anything." I stared at him for a moment. There was remorse there. Could see it now. Maybe even understanding. But I also knew something else. He hadn't come just to talk. "What do you want, Logan?" He looked startled. Then guilty. "I came to tell you. Dad's not well. He's been sick. Some kind of heart issue. Mom's a wreck. They moved into a small apartment in town. He doesn't say much anymore." "And?" asked voice steady. They miss you. Even if they don't know how to say it." I crossed my arms. Missing someone is easy. Saying, "Don't come home for Christmas" is easier. Living with the fallout, that's where it hurts. Logan swallowed. "I know. I just thought maybe. If you wanted to see him." I studied him. Years ago, I would have folded at that. I would have grabbed my coat, rushed to the apartment, desperate for a second chance. But now, "I don't need anything from him," I said softly. "Not anymore." I made peace without an apology. What I needed was acknowledgement. What I got was paperwork and silence. Logan's eyes dropped to the ground. He doesn't expect forgiveness. But he's afraid he'll never get a chance to make it right. I stared at the frost-covered flower beds, then back at the home I had built. I gave him chances, Logan. For years, he chose silence. Now I choose peace. He nodded, slowly, like he knew this visit wasn't going to change anything, but he had to try. Before he turned to leave, he asked one last thing. "Do you hate us?" I shook my head. "No, I'm grateful." Because losing everything you think you need is how you figure out what you're really made of. He didn't argue. He just walked back to his car and drove away. And I went back to the garden. The women of Willow House grew. Meredith got a full-time job as a dispatcher. Jules started volunteering at the VA hospital. Shantae enrolled in a culinary program. Every month we welcomed someone new. Sister. A survivor. A warrior. And each one brought something into that house that my old family never could. Healing. One evening in May we had a little barbecue out back. Someone brought a guitar. Another brought a tray of lemon bars that reminded me of my mother's, but sweeter somehow. As the sun dipped behind the trees and laughter rang across the yard, I stepped inside the house alone for a moment. I stood in the living room, now painted a soft sea glass green. The scratch in the floor was still there, filled and sanded, but visible. Scar. Story. Reminder. Smiled. I had spent so long waiting for love to be handed to me in the way I imagined it. But love didn't always come with arms wide open or perfect words. Sometimes it came in the form of letting go. I no longer needed my father's apology. I didn't need my mother's whispered regrets. And Logan. He had done what he could. But I had built something none of them had the courage to. Real home. Not for nostalgia. Not for show. But for women who thought they were alone like I once did. And every time someone new walked through that door with heavy bags and tired eyes, I made sure to greet them with one sentence I never heard growing up. You belong here. Summer crept into Boulder with golden sun and long, forgiving days. The trees around Willow House were full and green again, and laughter spilled from its windows most evenings. Soft, honest, sometimes filled with tears but always real. That house, once cold with silence and soaked in rejection, now held warmth in every corner. It was no longer a place of absence. It had become a sanctuary not just for others but for me. One morning in early July, I found a letter in the mailbox. There was no return address. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's. I stood on the porch for a long moment, turning the envelope over in my hand. Could have tossed it. Could have burned it. But something about the weight of it made me sit down on the porch swing and read. Dear Sadie. If I knew how to say what I feel without breaking, I'd have said it long ago. I was always proud of you. Always. But I was afraid of your father. Afraid of what standing up to him would mean, for you, for me, for Logan. So I said nothing. I stayed silent when I should have roared. And that silence hurt you more than I can ever undo. Your father is not the same. He spends most of his time staring at the walls now, murmuring things we never understood when you were away. He keeps the letter you sent on the table, reading it again and again like he's hoping the words will change. They won't. But neither will the truth. We lost you before we even realized we had. And I see now that you found a life outside of us, a better one, braver one. I don't expect forgiveness, Sadie. I just wanted you to know that this house you've made. It's beautiful. I saw it in the paper. An article about female vets finding safe haven at a place called Willow House. I didn't need the photo to know it was you. I could feel you in every word. I'm sorry, sweetheart. For the silence. For the years. For everything. Love always. I held the letter in my lap, staring at the ink until it blurred. Not from rage. Not even from grief. Just release. I let the paper fall to my side and stared up at the sky. I hadn't written them off completely. Not really. I had just stopped letting them hurt me. There's a difference. I folded the letter and tucked it into a small drawer in the front hallway, beside old photos and some of my service medals. I didn't need to frame it. It wasn't closure. It was just acknowledgement. And that was enough. That weekend, we hosted a small fundraiser at Willow House. I wore a blue summer dress, something I never would have been comfortable in years ago. My boots were polished. My posture strong. Veterans, donors, volunteers, and city officials gathered in the backyard. A string quartet played softly. A local bakery donated cakes. The air buzzed with stories, laughter, and hope. When the mayor handed me the community hero plaque, I held it lightly and simply said, I built this house with anger in my heart. But it's love that keeps it standing. The crowd clapped, but the real applause came later, from one of the new women staying with us. Her name was Danica, 27, recently discharged, nowhere to go, bruises beneath her sleeves. She looked me in the eyes after the ceremony and said, I didn't know people like you existed. I touched her arm gently. You'll become someone like you too. That night, as the last of the string lights flickered out and the guests went home, I found myself alone on the porch again. I lit the small candle I kept by the front window, an old tradition I had created for myself. It wasn't for my parents. Not anymore. It was for the girl I used to be. The one who once stood in the snow, reading a text that told her not to come home. That girl had made a home anyway. Inside, the house was quiet, but not empty. I walked the hallways, checking locks, folding blankets, adjusting curtains, just like my mother used to when she was pretending everything was fine. Only now everything was fine. Not perfect, but real. I stopped in front of the old living room wall. The scratch in the floor had been filled, but I'd had a quote stenciled over the wall where the family photo used to hang. Just 5 words. We protect those who rise. That was Willow House now. That was me. A week later, Ethan came by with an envelope. I think this one's yours, he said, handing it over. It came through the VA legal office. I opened it slowly. Inside was a notarized letter. My father had officially relinquished all remaining claims or interest in the Willow Creek property. Even though I had full legal authority already, he had chosen, without pressure, without lawsuit, to let go. I stared at his signature at the bottom of the document. Victor Monroe. His handwriting was weaker than I remembered. Cheeky, but legible. Beneath it, just 2 words written in pen, separate from the legal print. Thank you. I don't know what he meant. Thank you for taking the house off their hands. For keeping them from financial ruin. Or for doing what he never could. It didn't matter. I placed the document in the office file cabinet and shut the drawer with a soft click. No more lawyers. No more fights. Just peace. That fall, I planted willow saplings around the perimeter of the property. Jules helped me dig. Meredith laid the mulch. Danica brought iced tea. As we worked, we talked. Not about war. Not about pain. Just about the future. You ever think about turning this into more than one house? Meredith asked, squinting against the sun. Sometimes, I said. But this one needed to exist first. Why call it Willow? Danica asked. Smiled. Because a willow bends without breaking. Because it survives storms and still stands graceful. They nodded. And as we stepped back to admire the line of saplings dancing in the breeze, I realized I had finally built what I had searched for my entire life. A place where broken things could grow again. The first snow of the new winter came early. Soft and steady, it coated the roof of Willow House in a quiet white hush. I stood at the window in the front room, watching it fall, the same spot where I once sat as a child, drawing on cold mornings, hoping someone would come look and say, "That's beautiful." Now I no longer waited for anyone to see me. I had already seen myself. The house was full that December. Every room occupied by women who'd worn uniforms and carried burdens far heavier than any civilian could understand. Some had stories they weren't ready to tell. Others told theirs too quickly, as if releasing it made it hurt less. But all of them without question found safety here. That week before Christmas, Danica helped me string lights across the front porch. Jules picked out a tree from a nearby farm. Meredith insisted on baking gingerbread. The house smelled like cinnamon, pine, and healing. On Christmas Eve, we gathered in the living room. Blankets over knees. Cups of cider in hand. The lights dimmed. We shared memories, both joyful and painful, of what holidays used to mean. Before deployments, before trauma, before silence. And then Shantae, now a graduate of her culinary program, stood and raised her glass. "To Sadie," she said, "for giving us a home when the world gave us nothing." Everyone turned toward me. I shook my head, smiling gently. To all of us. For surviving. For not letting bitterness steal what we still have. But when they cheered my name, I didn't stop them. I let the warmth settle around me. For once, I let myself receive the love I had been giving. That night, after everyone went to bed, I stepped outside onto the porch alone. The air was crisp, the world silent. I lit my small candle and placed it in the front window, just like I had the year before. But this time, it wasn't a flame of mourning. It was a symbol, beacon, promise. I thought about my father, now in a small apartment somewhere in town. I didn't know if he still stared at that letter. I didn't know if my mother still whispered apologies when no one could hear. I hadn't spoken to either of them since Logan's visit in the spring. And that was okay. Some wounds heal not through reunion, but through purpose. I turned back toward the house, its windows glowing gold from within. And I realized something profound. I hadn't just reclaimed a house. I had reclaimed myself. The little girl who had once flinched at every raised voice. The soldier who called home and was met with silence. The woman who stood in a courtroom of her own making. She was no longer waiting to be loved by people who couldn't give it. She was building love from the ground up. Brick by brick. Room by room. Not for revenge, but for redemption. And if my parents ever stood on this porch again, I'd welcome them with grace, but not apology. I'd look them in the eye and let them see what they lost, and what I found without them. My name is Sadie Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And the home I was told not to return to, I turned it into a sanctuary. Not for them, but for every woman like me who deserved warmth, dignity, and a second chance. Every Christmas I will light that candle. Not for grief, but to remind myself. We deserve love that doesn't need to be earned. And when no one gives it to us, we build it ourselves. Sadie's story isn't just about taking back a house. It's about taking back her worth. So many of us carry the wounds of being overlooked, underestimated, or unwanted by those who were supposed to protect us. But like Sadie, we have the power to set boundaries, heal, and create something better, something sacred. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember they're not alone. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful, emotional, and true-to-life stories. And in the comments, tell us, have you ever had to walk away to find peace?